So some possible good and very interesting news for Xbox fans. It's not every day that, Xbox kind of gets the big end of the stick. Usually they get the short end of the stick. So it is nice to see when stuff like this happens and how gamers can kind of, turn around and, get some cool things on the on the opposite side for a change. Like Microsoft has had a bit of a rough go of late, and that's not really a surprise given their stance in gaming in general and the things that they've kind of done. But still for me, I kind of look at it and say they can still change things up. They can still offer people something of value, and I think that's the good part about gaming in general is, yeah, there are, people that are very much have long memories when it comes to this stuff, but it's still one of those things where I think it's cool because anybody can, like, let's just look at things, right? Like, people really hated the Wii U, and then they came the Switch, People really didn't like the PS3, but then came the PS4. And, people didn't really gravitate towards the Xbox, but they did with the Xbox 360. So I honestly think anything can happen in this day and age. It really just kind of depends on what a company's doing, what they're offering, and stuff like that. So that, to me, is very much how I look at things, and probably how everybody should look at things as well. So Microsoft and the Xbox does kind of get overlooked a lot of the time when it comes to games lately, a lot more than probably I'd like as a fan. But one series that looks like maybe could be coming to Xbox after a period of time is the game Nioh, because Nioh 3 is confirmed a 6 months timed exclusive, console-wise anyway, to PlayStation. It's launching first on PlayStation, but timed exclusivity wording has sparked questions about whether an Xbox release could ever follow. Now, keep in mind, the way that they kind of word this is also very strange, because it's a situation where they kind of talked like this with the first Final Fantasy remake as well. And what happened was basically that was a situation where that game didn't come till 6 years later. So we don't know 100% what's going to happen, but Nioh 3 is the next entry in Team Ninja's Souls-like action RPG series, drawing heavily on Japanese history and mythology. The game is set to release on PlayStation 5 on February 6th, which will disappoint many Xbox fans hoping for a console rollout. However, eagle-eyed viewers spotted a small but notable detail at the end of the game's latest trailer. The fine print states that Nioh 3 is a 6-month timed exclusive, a phrase that naturally raises questions about what could happen next. That wording is enough to spark curiosity, but it is not a confirmation of anything beyond the initial release window. Given the series' history, fans may want to keep expectations in check. As many fans were quick to point out, no Nioh game is ever released on Xbox. When Team Ninja was asked about the possibility of an Xbox port back in 2022, it said it was not really doing too much of a possibility of having Nioh on Xbox platforms. That comment is now a few years old, and circumstances can change. Team Ninja has since worked more closely with Xbox, including Ninja Gaiden 4, launching on the platform and being published by Xbox itself. Even so, the lack of any existing Nioh titles on Xbox complicates the conversation. Without the earlier entries available, it remains unclear how or if Nioh 3 could realistically arrive on the platform, especially as a standalone release. That isn't saying we can't potentially see the arrival of past Nioh titles on Xbox, as Team Ninja might see it as a platform to make some extra bucks on, and while the 6-month timed exclusivity window doesn't directly confirm an Xbox release, it rather just ends Sony's exclusivity window for the game. There's also a chance that the game or other games in the series could just be heading to the Nintendo Switch, a much more capable console than its predecessor, with an actively growing install base compared to Xbox dwindling numbers. So, I mean, that is a key point to keep in mind here. The other thing is, the Switch 2 is huge in, the Switch is tremendously huge in Japan. So you have to keep that in mind as well. I mean, believe it or not, the Switch 2 is selling like hotcakes in Japan, and, a game like Nioh 3 or even the entire series could probably do extremely well on the Switch 2. So, I know that there is a lot of people that probably are using this as a gotcha. It's hard saying. Could it come to Xbox? I guess. I've never heard Xbox fans scour for it. I don't think Nioh is a very big game, to be honest with you. I just honestly don't feel like it is. But if it is a huge game, or if it is a big game, then so be it. I just think that it's sold kind of moderately, and I think Sony has kind of helped in the past to to get some of those things kind of rolling. in terms of funding for it, so they probably aren't in the business of helping, games come to Xbox platforms. You know what I mean? Just like for me anyway. Obviously, it isn't something that looks like it would be, a huge smash. Obviously, we've seen that. But Ninja Gaiden 4, for example, that game released on PlayStation, that game released on Xbox, but it sold incredibly poorly across the board. They're saying it only sold a couple 100,000 altogether on everything, which is really nothing. I mean, it's a name that kind of, oh wow, Ninja Gaiden, right? But I don't think that game carries much weight anymore, which is an unfortunate circumstance to be in, because, and again, I haven't really played it, but I've heard from some people that it was, a moderately fun game. But again, I've also heard from people that it was, not truly Ninja Gaiden. So, we'll see how some of these things come out in the future or whatever. I do think that Microsoft has some interesting things ahead of them, because they were really thinking that, hey, if we put a lot of this stuff on, on PlayStation or whatever, we'll make big bucks. And then that ended up not being the case. So, that's a real struggle right there, when you're a company that's thinking, hey, we've got it all figured out, and, we're gonna sell all this stuff. And, it's going to be great. We're going to make all this money. And then when you turn around and look at it and you say, hey, how come none of that stuff sold? And I've mentioned this before, but it's like, people like to use that term ecosystem when it comes to like Xbox or gaming or whatever. But the ecosystem is fragile in general, meaning that, the way that there are with third-party developers, like, and I'm going to count Activision as that. So, Activision, EA, Ubisoft, these third parties, these big third parties, there is only so many games that can release throughout a year. And now Microsoft is kind of upsetting that balance. And, that's realistically, a real big issue in the future, because, for me anyway, I just really feel like we're going to be all worse off, even PlayStation fans, because, we're not seeing that situation where, where gamers are getting stuff, where, because of the lack of competition. And that is the thing that I think really hurts the most, overall. But hey, overall, hey, this could be good news. Maybe Xbox fans will get this. Would be a real kind of change up, because lately it almost felt like, a lot of developers, small and medium-sized developers, were forgetting about Xbox, because some games were even canceled days before release, and I feel like that's probably never a good thing in general. But, you guys might feel differently about this stuff. I'm curious, or would any of you guys play that game, or is it sort of like the whole situation with, Final Fantasy, where everybody kind of talks a good game, but then nobody's like really buying it or whatever? Because, I mean, that's the sad fact when you look at it. Like, Final Fantasy might have landed in the top 10 for most paid games or whatever, but when you look at it, nothing else had released. And, the things that were ahead of it, even like Red Dead Redemption 1, I don't think there was like millions of people rushing out to buy that. So, you have to kind of look at it from that perspective, that it was probably selling a few thousand copies or so, but it definitely wasn't like millions of copies or anything. But a lot of Xbox fans were wanting to kind of go out there and, and kind of were waiting to see how these things are handled. And, I don't know how it's handled, to be honest with you, so we'll see. Again, you guys might feel a little bit differently than I do about some of this stuff, but I think that it would be cooler if Xbox were getting more stuff. But maybe the whole idea behind what Microsoft is doing next is that, if they could have actually, done something special for a change. I don't know. You guys, I don't know, that maybe their whole goal with whatever's next is that, they get PC for. The only problem that really stems from that is a lot of people skip the Windows version anyway. So if they're already skipping Windows and they skip Xbox, that basically means that Microsoft's selling people PC they can buy Steam games. It just doesn't really seem like a viable way to kind of stay into, the viable way they can help gaming in any way, especially Xbox. So I don't know. We'll see how it all works out. I'll link this in the description. You guys can let me know how you feel about it, maybe if you would buy it or not. Certainly appreciate you guys and all that kind of stuff. Please like, share, subscribe, comment, all that good stuff. Very, very much appreciate each and every one of you that take time out to watch the content. Rack 'em up. Crap Gamer out.